asked. The Aorangi scheme is a notoriously open secret. It's not some closed thing off in Brazil or in some far-off place. There are 400 people, largely in Timaru, who enthusiastically belong to this club of people that invest with Alan. It's quite a remarkable thought that one person didn't get a prospectus, and this has triggered off all this reaction. There are obviously a lot more complainants around a lot of other things that have gone on in the country in the finance sector.
Okay, let's talk about those 400 investors. They're owed $96 million, apparently, and yet they've been told that they're not going to see that money in any form for quite some time. How long could it take for them?
Well, again, it depends a little bit on the information that the SFO has and how long they pursue it. There have been some pretty rapid reports out from the statutory managers. The first one came out last week, of course, and that seems to indicate that they'll be working post-haste to get this done. I think the frustration that the investors feel, and of course this has nothing to do with South Canterbury, so I know what I read in the paper plus a little bit of insight into it. But, investors, I think, got all of their payments when they wanted them, traditionally for decades, and now they're stuck because the government has come in to help. So to them, it strikes them as quite a perverse kind of an outcome so far.
Now, the investigators have said that very soon they're going to make a decision whether or not they will proceed further. What if they get it wrong about Alan Hubbard?
Well, presumably they will have the political savvy and the professionalism to simply back off and say we got it wrong. That would be quite extraordinary, and I suspect that there are issues involved in all of this. Whether the issues warrant the particular outcome and methodology that's been applied is what we're all waiting to see.
The Hubbards are fighting back, of course. They've hired now lawyers Russell McVeigh, and they also are calling for a royal commission. What are your thoughts on that? Well,
Alan is perturbed that his name has been linked with fraud. He's responded publicly. Alan is a fighter and a battler and, is a very persevering guy. He's held up very well through all of this. It's obviously personally very embarrassing and damaging to have a reputation for integrity, which is legion, suddenly called into question. And it's had a lot of flow-on effects in all the businesses that Alan has been involved with. So it would really be a tragedy if it turns out that there's not much there. Like everybody else, we'll wait to see.
Let's talk about South Canterbury finance and the flow on there. What did you think when you first heard about the investigation?
Well, I was busily working away at home on a Sunday afternoon, minding my own business, having come off the back of one of the most successful weeks and months that South Canterbury's had in recent history. We'd been out fundraising and changing our maturity schedule, and it'd been just a land office rush to go with us and get things moving forward. And I got a call at 3:30 that said, watch your TV in 30 minutes, and are you sitting down? We have some news for you. And like everyone else in the country, we just tried to react to that. The minister was quick to announce that their investigations to date had shown that South Canterbury was not involved, which was a good message. And the Treasury quickly announced that the guarantee was unaffected. So those were, attempts to put South Canterbury in the right perspective. But it's had a dramatic effect on us over time. It's really still almost too early to tell how long it'll last and how bad it'll be. But the backwash of all of this took all of the momentum and wind out of the sails in various areas, and it's slowly, we think, been coming back.
And slowly, the credit rating, of course, for South Canterbury Finance has been notching down. It's now down to a B-. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, the credit rating, Standard & Poor's has a series of metrics that they live by, and it's hard to argue with them in a general sense, but I think they had been catching up with a lot of the deterioration that occurred in South Canterbury over the years. And we had learned to live with that, and we're starting to reverse the momentum and address the problems which they were finding. Probably we weren't addressing it fast enough, but it's now become even harder to get to the bottom of that and reverse it. So, yeah, it's been hard.
Critics are now saying that, look, it's taxpayers' money in the government guarantee scheme that's propping South Canterbury Finance up. Time to get out. What do you say to them?
Well, the guarantee scheme came into effect 2 years ago in the depths of the global financial crisis for a range of reasons. It wasn't something that South Canterbury went down and asked for, and it affected all of the banks and all of the finance companies, and it was always going to have a lot of unintended effects. And the problem we face now is that people have gotten mentally wedded to the fact that investment should be guaranteed in finance companies. How do you reverse that cycle and get out of it and get back to the old normal and establish some sort of new normal? I don't think people should get out. I mean, the guarantee program is real. It exists. It's a legal covenant between the government and the individual investors, and it remains intact. There are people that run around and say, well, the world is coming to an end and the government won't be there to pay and the South Island is imploding and the rural sector is gone, and all of these dramatic things that you hear in the press. South Canterbury doesn't share that view at all. We have a future. The guarantee will be there. It's really a question of using the guarantee period to reorient our liability portfolio and sail off into the future.
One final question. Alan Hubbard has always said he's going to bring in a great big investor. That never happened. That was to happen June the 30th. What's going to be the final solution? Well,
Alan's target was June 30th, and Alan, as I said, is a reasonably aggressive, savvy guy. June 20th events, I think, probably derailed him a bit. But that process has always been under the control of South Canterbury, actually, the process of finding an investor. We've gone from a long list to a short list. Our target has always been August 31st, which is the extent of the waiver that we have from our trustee to get that completed. So we've never gone on record as saying June 30th was our target. Our target's the 31st of August. We're busily trying to keep the ship afloat until then, and the process is underway, and there are a couple of good fish on the line.
There's talk now, Sandy, that Bill English is behind the thought of a new bank down in the South Island. What do you make about that?
Well, you have to try to ascertain whether we have a desperate need for a new bank. I mean, we've got quite a number of banks that service quite a number of niches. Can you go out and sort of do some math and say we need a new one? I doubt that. The schemes that we've read recently to combine different entities into a new bank, these are terribly difficult things to do. I mean, there are different cultures in these institutions. It takes years to mesh them together. Generally, the asset and liability base of the existing institutions don't look anything like a bank should have at the end of the day. So, I take it with a grain of salt. It's an interesting hypothetical comment. If there's real need for it, it will probably happen and it will probably thrive. But even at the end of the day, if a co-op and a building society and a finance company get together and say we're going to become a bank, you end up competing with some fairly determined organizations anyway, and it's hard to see that there's a lot of empty space in that. But good luck to them.
Yeah, and that's my take on it as well. It's tough enough for the big established banks to find the cheap money these days. How are we going to do it as a little startup? James?
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest question. The major trading banks here in New Zealand are finding it, finding it difficult to raise money both onshore and offshore in terms of retail funds, raising capital so that they've got adequate capital in their on their balance sheets. So for a startup bank to come in and attempt to overthrow those, then it's going to be difficult. It's interesting to see what will happen. I guess competition in the market always finds people out. So we'll be looking down the track with interest.
Farmers here now are a little worried. The rural price for their farms continues to fall and fall and fall. What's going on?
Yeah, well, the latest Real Estate Institute figures show that that the farm values and farm sales have dropped again over the past month. When I look at these figures, then I do take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, as in there's a lot of volatility. I looked at some of the dairy numbers, and the price per kilogram of milk solids fluctuates between $9 or $10 in different months. I think in general it does show a trend. The farm sales and farm values have dropped over the past 2 years, and that's no surprise given what we've been through over the past 2 years. And the volume is just not there. I mean, you'd have to argue that people that have been selling farms over the past 2 years have probably been in distress situations, and they probably had to sell a little bit less than what they would have liked to. And there is a bit of a gap at the moment between what a buyer's prepared to pay and what a seller's prepared to sell for.
Well, Genevieve, all of these questions have an interesting relationship because we're talking about the volatility of land prices domestically, and it's obviously hard to found a listed business on something that's volatile, land prices, commodity prices. And then we've got the issue of, is it good for people to come in and buy our land? And so we structure around that so that they're involved in the industrial, presumably more stable end. And then we've got our own investors going to Uruguay